What's up, guys? I'm so glad that we are continuing in our series on Daniel. Before we get going super far, the book I'm reading throughout this quarantine and then also throughout this series is Christ-Centered Exposition. It's a commentary series, but it's all application. So I would encourage you to look into that series if you're looking for a commentary to help understand what you're reading. This one is a really good one as it talks about the book of Daniel in an applicable way that you can understand. And it's even helped me a ton. So last week in Daniel chapter 1, we looked at how Daniel's personal holiness gave him the ability to speak into King Nebuchadnezzar's life. And this week, I think we're going to see that same theme continue into this week. And we're also going to see a new theme get added into it. But let's do a refresher of what Daniel 1 was about. King Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and they conquered the nation of Judah. Okay, and so in this chapter of Daniel chapter 1, Daniel and three of his friends, who we know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refused to eat the king's meat. And they decided to eat vegetables over the next 10 days because that's what God had instructed them to do. At the end of those 10 days, it proved that they were still healthy, and this gave Daniel the ability to speak into the king's life because God was working wonders inside of Daniel's life. And King Nebuchadnezzar noticed that there was something different about Daniel. So last week we talked about dare to be a Daniel. And this week we still want to keep that idea going of dare to be a Daniel. See, this week in Daniel chapter 2, we're going to be looking at Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a crazy dreamer. I have all these off-the-wall dreams all the time. I sleepwalk, I sleep talk. It's crazy. Dreams are one of those things you can never remember what they are sometimes. Sometimes you have very vivid dreams, but whenever we hear the word dreams, different things pop up inside of our heads, whether they're good dreams, whether they're bad dreams. But Nebuchadnezzar, he was having some bad dreams. In Daniel chapter 2, it said that his dreams are causing him to lose sleep. Chapter 2 tells us that Nebuchadnezzar is in his second year of being a king and he's having trouble sleeping. And now it doesn't appear that he's having trouble sleeping because he's the king over one of the biggest nations at the time of Babylon. It says he's just having trouble due to a dream. In this time, in verse 5, it says that if people could not interpret his dreams, that he would have them torn limb from limb. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't even want to take on that challenge to help somebody figure out what their dreams are if the punishment for not figuring it out was being torn limb from limb. Nebuchadnezzar was really, really torn up about this dream. Whatever this was keeping up Nebuchadnezzar at night, it was something that really, really frustrated him. So he sent out like a memo to all the wise people of the nation of Babylon. And he said, hey, I want you to interpret my dream. In verse 6, it says, if you are able to interpret this dream, then you'll receive many honors and glories and different things given to him by the king. So some people were intrigued by that, but at the same time, with the warning that if they did not get it right, they would be torn limb from limb, most people avoided this call for interpreting this dream. Now, many of the Chaldeans, they could not interpret this dream. In Daniel chapter 2, at the beginning, it says that many of them were being killed. All of the wise men of Babylon were being killed because they could not figure out this dream. Now, to me, it's kind of head-scratching that he would kill the wise people of the nation, but that's how irate King Nebuchadnezzar was about his dream. Well, enter Daniel. Well, Daniel hears all about King Nebuchadnezzar, and he hears about his dream and how people are dying. So what does he do? He goes to his three friends who also did not eat the king's meat, but did the same diet as Daniel. And he went to them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as we know them. And he told them about the dream, and he told them that he was going to help the king interpret his dream. Now, one of the really cool things about this is that Daniel and his friends sought the Lord before they did this. Before they entered a big decision, Daniel and his friends took time to pray to God in order that they would find mercy in God's eyes and be able to interpret the king's dream. Now, what exactly was this dream? What was this dream that was keeping Nebuchadnezzar up at night? Well, I'm going to read you Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 through 35. Then we're going to break down this dream and see the benefits that Daniel has of helping the king look at his dream. Now, one of the things I love is as Daniel approaches the king before he says, hey, before I can even interpret this dream, I want you to know that this is not by my own wisdom, but this is only wisdom given to me by God. Daniel is a man who's very humble. He's very knowledgeable of the Lord, and he was also knowledgeable that he is only able to do things by God's grace. So Daniel, he says, hey, before I even interpret this dream, I want you to know that the power given to me is not by my own power, but it is from God. Verse 31, he starts to retell the dream that King Nebuchadnezzar is having to King Nebuchadnezzar, just so they're on the same page. Verse 31, it says this: You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, and its chest and arms are silver, and in the middle and its thighs are bronze. Its legs are iron, its feet partly iron and partly clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out, not by a human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and the clay, and it broke them into pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and all the gold that were together broke into pieces and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried it away, so that not a trace of them could be found, but that the stone that was struck, the image, became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Now, this dream is a very interesting dream. To sum it up, King Nebuchadnezzar is having this dream of a giant statue with a gold head and silver arms and a middle body, and it had bronze and iron feet and clay feet. Now, this is not a normal dream that most people would have, but this is a dream given to Nebuchadnezzar by God for Daniel to interpret, for Daniel to speak into the life of King Nebuchadnezzar, and it also shows a prophecy that would later be fulfilled. So let's talk about this statue. Let's talk about the dream. The first thing it says is there's a head of gold. In verse 38, there is a head of gold. Daniel tells King Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold is you. The head of gold is Babylon. In Old Testament times, Babylon was a great city. It was a wealthy city. It was a huge city. And see, for King Nebuchadnezzar, he probably likes to hear the fact that his city, his nation, Babylon itself, is of gold. Then it goes on to talk about the chest and the arms of silver. To fulfill the prophecy from verses 32 and 39 of chapter 2, this is Persia that followed Babylon's rule. He said, after the head, there was the chest and the arms. Verse 39, he says, there is someone who's going to come in after you and fill your shoes. And the stomach and the thighs of bronze, see, they represent Greece. Think back to what we call the intertestamental period as Christians. That's the time between the Old Testament and the New Testament. But you probably know a guy by the name of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great built a huge empire that stood in Greece for many, many years, hundreds of years before Rome started its reign. See, the stomach and the thighs of bronze, this represented Greece. Then it said that there was legs of iron and there was legs of clay. It said that they were pieced together. This represents Rome, the nation that would come after Greece and long-standing and reign and rule over the world. In verses 33 and 40 through 43, you can see the description given of what is Rome. But the most important part about this statue is not the statue itself. The important part about the statue is the stone that is cut out of the mountain. See, what I love is that Daniel says is, hey, this stone is not one that's been cut out by human hands. What he's saying is this stone is of God. It says that this stone right here will crush this statue. Now, what is this stone? See, whenever we read this stone, whenever we read this passage and we think, What is this stone? It's not another nation that would come up. It's not another ruler that would rise up and overthrow whatever current government was ruling at the time. See, this is the fulfillment of the prophecy that Christ would one day come and tear down all of the walls and destroy all of the long-standing government of Rome, and he would instill Christianity into the world by him living a perfect, sinless life and to die on a cross, and 3 days later to rise again. The stone that would crush the statue, the stone that would crush the oppression of all the people throughout the world to give freedom, that stone is Jesus Christ. And it says right after Nebuchadnezzar hears this, he falls on the ground in front of Daniel and he starts to weep, and it says he starts to worship him. Now, Daniel does not have anything deity in him. He's not God by any way. But King Nebuchadnezzar sees him as a representative of God. And going back to, as I mentioned earlier in verse 6, whoever was able to tell the king his dream, he would be given fine things. He would be given a place at the king's table. So now Daniel, one who was just, going back to chapter 1, just a young Hebrew man who was very smart of the nation of Judah, was then able to say, hey, I can do what God wants me to do, and that paid off in a way by him not eating the king's meat. That gave him the ability to speak into the king's life, to now where we're at, for David to physically stand before the king and interpret his dream in a way to show that God would one day rule the earth and that God would crush all the oppression through Jesus Christ. Now Nebuchadnezzar is praising him and worshiping him by saying, you know the God of gods, you know the Lord of lords, you know the King of kings. See, in all reality, this is what we see in this passage. It says that God honors his servants who faithfully serve him. Now, I know that this is a hard time. I know that this is a trying time. I know that this time that we're facing right now is not ideal. But this is what I want to encourage you. God honors his servants who still serve him faithfully. Just like Daniel, you have times in your life that you can serve God faithfully. Just like Daniel, you will stand face to face in the middle of adversity, but I want to challenge you to stand strong in God's promises. Remember last week we talked about Daniel's holiness would give him the ability to speak into King Nebuchadnezzar's life. What's happening right now? As Daniel has his holiness to himself, as Daniel has his own personal holiness, and as he's speaking in to the life of King Nebuchadnezzar, we see that God is honoring Daniel for his personal holiness in a way that he is able to speak into the king's life that would then appoint Daniel a place at the king's table and in the king's court. So, here's the challenge. I want you to still think, how can I serve God in this quarantine? How can I still chase after God? How can I still point other people to Jesus just as Daniel did? See, Daniel, he said, here's all the things that are coming after you. Here's all the prophecies. Here's all the nations. Here's Babylon. Here's Persia. Here's Greece. Here's Rome. These massive governments, these massive nations. But I want you to know that Christ will strike them all down and Christ will rule and reign. In the midst of hard times, when it feels like things are on the throne of other things of where they're not supposed to be, Christ will still reign triumphant and Christ will still strike them down. Thank you so much for watching. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this past video. Look, to stay connected with what we're doing here at Midway Church, there's many ways you can do that. The first is this: subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, when you subscribe, turn on your notifications. That way you know when we post a video so you can be in the loop about what's going on. Every Sunday morning at 11 a.m., Midway Church will be broadcasting our sermons live on our church Facebook page. Just type in Midway Church. There you will find exactly where we will be worshiping together as a church. If you don't follow any of our social media accounts, you need to do that. Our social media for Instagram is Midway_students. There you'll find all of our posts and other content. And also, if you're on Facebook, it's Midway Student Ministry. I hope you go there, you'll find out what we're doing, and it'll be a way for you to stay connected in a time where things feel so crazy. Boom.